The stars above the battlefield always seemed colder to Ryan than the ones back on Earth. He was a soldier, trained to fight, but in this faraway corner of the galaxy, his heart longed for peace more than victory. The war had dragged on for years. Humans and alien factions clashed over resources, borders, and pride. Yet to Ryan, every side had faces, families, and lives worth more than the endless fight. On one quiet night patrol, Ryan moved carefully through the ruins of an old alien city. The buildings stood broken, their walls covered in strange symbols that no one had bothered to understand. His boots crunched over dust and broken stone as he scanned the area. Command had ordered him to check for hidden raiders. He expected nothing but silence. But then he heard it. A soft sound, almost like a cry. Ryan froze. He pressed his back against a wall and listened. The sound came again, muffled and weak, from below. It was not the cry of a soldier. It was small, fragile, and full of fear. He tightened his grip on his rifle, unsure if it was a trick. Raiders sometimes used recordings to lure patrols into traps. But something about this cry felt real. He followed the sound down a cracked stairwell into the shadow of a collapsed temple. The air smelled of damp stone and rusted metal. Light from his torch cut through the darkness, showing rubble piled against a heavy door. The cry came from behind it. With slow effort, Ryan pushed the rubble aside. His armor scraped against stone, and dust filled the air. Finally, he forced the door open. Inside, the torch revealed a small chamber. The walls were lined with cages made of alien metal. Most were empty, but in the far corner, one cage held a figure curled on the ground. It was a child. Her skin shimmered faintly with a pale silver hue, and her hair, long and dark, clung to her face. Her eyes, wide with fear, glowed faintly in the dim light. She was not human. She was alien. Ryan's heart tightened. She was no raider, no soldier. Just a little girl. When the light hit her, she flinched and covered her face. Her small voice trembled as she spoke in her own language, words he could not understand. Ryan lowered his weapon slowly, raising one hand to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. His voice echoed in the empty chamber. "I won't hurt you." The girl peeked through her fingers. Though she could not understand his words, his tone carried calmness. She whispered something again, a single word repeated like a plea. Ryan approached the cage. He studied the lock. It was crude, not the work of her people but of raiders. With a quick strike from his knife, the lock broke apart. The cage door creaked open. The girl shrank back at first, uncertain, but Ryan crouched low to make himself smaller. He extended his hand, palm up. "Come on," he whispered. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with slow steps, she moved closer and placed her trembling hand in his. Her fingers were thin and delicate, yet her grip was desperate, clinging to him as if afraid he would vanish. "There you go," Ryan said, lifting her gently out of the cage. She stumbled at first, weak from her time in captivity. He steadied her, then gave her a sip of water from his canteen. She drank carefully, her eyes never leaving his face. "What's your name?" Ryan asked, even though he doubted she would answer. The girl touched her chest lightly and said, "Lyra." Her voice was soft, but the name was clear. "Lyra," Ryan repeated. "All right, Lyra. I'm Ryan." She tilted her head at his name, trying to copy it. "Re-an." Hearing her try made him smile despite the danger around them. But the moment of calm did not last. From above, distant voices echoed through the ruins. Heavy boots struck the stone. Raiders were near. They must have heard the rubble shift when he forced the door. Ryan quickly lifted Lyra into his arms. She gasped but held on tight. He carried her up the stairwell, careful to keep the torch low. The voices grew louder. He stopped at the top and listened. The raiders spoke in harsh tones. He could not understand their words, but their anger was clear. They had discovered their prisoner missing. Ryan ducked into the shadows of a broken archway, holding Lyra close. Her small hands gripped his armor. He could feel her heart pounding against his chest. "SHH," he whispered, patting her back gently. "It's all right. I'll get you out." One raider passed by, his weapon glowing faintly in the dark. Ryan waited until the sound of footsteps faded, then moved quickly across the ruins. He avoided the main paths, choosing narrow alleys where the shadows hid them. The night stretched long as he carried Lyra through the broken city. More than once, he had to pause and hide as patrols passed nearby. Each time, the girl pressed her face into his shoulder, staying quiet. Finally, they reached the edge of the ruins. Beyond lay the dark forest. The thick trees swayed in the wind, offering cover but also new dangers. Ryan set Lyra down for a moment to rest. She looked at the forest with fear, then at him. Her small voice trembled. "Home." Mother. Ryan did not know her mother, nor where her home was. But he understood her meaning. She wanted to go back, and she wanted to see her family. He knelt in front of her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I'll take you," he said firmly. "I promise." She did not understand all his words, but she saw the certainty in his eyes. For the first time since he found her, she gave a small, hopeful nod. With that, they stepped into the forest together, the first steps of a long and dangerous journey. The forest around the ruined city stretched like a great wall of shadows. Tall trees with wide trunks stood in silence, their leaves whispering in the night wind. Strange calls of unseen creatures echoed from the distance. For Ryan, the forest was both a shield and a danger. Raiders would find it harder to follow them here, but the unknown paths could hide traps of their own. Lyra walked close beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly. She was weak from hunger and fear, yet she tried to keep pace. Every time a branch cracked under their feet, she jumped a little, her eyes wide with worry. Ryan slowed his steps so she would not fall behind. "You're safe," he said softly, though he knew she could not understand all his words. Still, tone meant more than language, and she looked up at him with trust in her silver eyes. They moved deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler, the sky hidden beneath a blanket of leaves. Ryan knew they could not walk forever. Lyra was just a child. She needed food, water, and rest. He searched for a place where they could stop for the night. At last, he found a hollow beneath the roots of a massive tree. The roots curled like thick arms, leaving a sheltered space just big enough for the two of them. It was not much, but it would keep the wind away and hide them from sight. Ryan guided Lyra inside. She curled up on the soft earth, her shoulders trembling. He offered her the rest of his water and a small pack of rations. She hesitated at first, unfamiliar with the human food, but hunger soon won. She ate carefully, chewing slowly, while her glowing eyes watched him with quiet curiosity. When she finished, she spoke a few words in her language. Most of it Ryan did not understand, but she touched her chest and whispered again, "Lyra." Then she pointed at him. "Ryan, he said, placing a hand on his chest. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. And hearing her say his name so carefully stirred something deep inside him. It was as if the walls between human and alien were not as strong as the war made them seem. She was just a child, lost and afraid, and he was someone who had promised to keep her safe. The forest outside stirred with noises. Branches cracked, and a deep growl echoed far away. Lyra shivered and pressed against Ryan's side. Without thinking, he placed his arm around her, letting her rest her head against his chest. She relaxed slowly, her breathing steadying as she drifted toward sleep. Ryan stayed awake. He kept his rifle close and his eyes sharp. The forest was alive with danger, but the thought of failing his promise weighed heavier than any fear. He had told her he would take her home. That vow now burned brighter than any duty given by commanders. Hours passed. The moonlight filtered faintly through gaps in the leaves, painting silver lines across the ground. Ryan's thoughts wandered as he watched the shadows. He wondered about her people, about the mother she spoke of. A queen, perhaps. If that was true, then Lyra was more than just a child. She was someone important. But to him, it did not matter. Important or not, she was still a little girl who deserved safety. When dawn came, the forest brightened with a soft golden glow. Birds with wings of color darted between the trees, their calls sharp and musical. Lyra stirred, rubbing her eyes with small hands. She looked at Ryan and gave a sleepy smile, as if surprised to find he was still there. "Good morning," he said gently, though she could not understand. She only tilted her head, repeating softly, "Morning." Ryan helped her stand. They continued their journey, moving carefully along narrow paths where the forest floor was covered in moss. Lyra pointed now and then, showing hidden trails that twisted through the trees. Her knowledge surprised him. She was young, but she seemed to remember paths her people once walked. By midday, they reached a stream. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and cold. Lyra knelt to drink, her face brightening at the taste of fresh water. Ryan refilled his canteen and let the cool liquid wash away some of his own fatigue. As they rested, he tried to speak with her, pointing to things and saying words. "Tree," he said, touching the rough bark. "Water," he added, pointing to the stream. Lyra repeated the sounds, her voice soft but eager. In return, she spoke her own words for them, teaching him little by little. The two of them laughed when they stumbled over each other's sounds. For a brief moment, the war and the danger around them seemed far away. But peace did not last long. The sound of heavy boots cracked through the forest. Ryan's body tensed. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her behind a fallen log. Voices echoed nearby. Raiders again. They must have tracked their path from the ruins. Lyra's face turned pale. She clung to him, her body trembling. Ryan placed a finger to his lips, signaling silence. He held his breath as shadows moved between the trees. The raiders passed close, weapons ready, eyes scanning the undergrowth. One of them paused, looking toward the log where they hid. Ryan tightened his grip on his rifle. If they were found, he would have to fight. The moment stretched like a blade's edge. Then, a noise deeper in the forest drew the raiders' attention. With a curse, he turned and followed the others. Slowly, their footsteps faded. Ryan exhaled in relief. He looked at Lyra, who still shook with fear. He placed a hand gently on her head. "It's all right. They're gone." She did not know the words, but she felt the comfort. Her small fingers gripped his hand tighter. In that instant, Ryan knew the bond between them had grown stronger. The day stretched on, and they continued forward. The forest seemed endless, but Lyra's eyes grew brighter whenever she spoke of her home. She repeated the word mother often, her voice carrying both hope and longing. Ryan listened each time, and though he could not promise how far or how long the journey would be, he always answered the same way, firm and steady. "I'll take you to her. I promise." As the sun dipped low and the sky turned orange, they found another sheltered hollow to rest. Lyra leaned against him, tired but no longer hopeless. She looked at him as if he were not just a soldier but a protector she could believe in. The forest grew darker as night returned. Shadows stretched long between the trees, and strange calls of unseen animals echoed through the thick undergrowth. Ryan moved carefully, carrying Lyra when the ground became rough. Her small hands held tightly onto his armor. She trusted him completely now, and he felt a responsibility heavier than any weapon he had carried. They had only gone a short distance when the sound of pursuit reached them. Heavy, uneven footsteps crashed through the forest, followed by shouted words in harsh tones. Ryan froze. The raiders had discovered the girl was missing from their grasp. They would not stop until she was returned. Ryan crouched behind a fallen tree, pulling Lyra close. Her silver eyes were wide with fear, and she whispered her name softly, as if calling for courage. "Lyra," he pressed a finger to his lips. "Stay quiet. Follow me exactly." Ryan knew the forest better than the raiders. Narrow paths, thick roots, and hidden depressions could slow them down. He led Lyra into a small ravine, where the trees leaned close together, forming a natural barrier. He hoped the raiders would not notice the hidden trail. Footsteps grew closer. Voices called out, angry and frustrated. Ryan's heart pounded, but he remained calm. Panic would not help them. He glanced down at Lyra. "Keep moving," he whispered, guiding her along a narrow ledge beside the ravine. Suddenly, a branch snapped beneath Lyra's foot. She froze, her grip on his hand tightening. One of the raiders stopped and turned. His glowing weapon cast light into the trees, scanning for movement. Ryan's mind raced. He had only seconds. Carefully, he lifted Lyra over a low wall of rocks and pulled her behind a thick tree. The raider's weapon passed by, missing them by inches. Lyra exhaled in relief. "Thank you," she whispered softly in her language. Ryan nodded, knowing she trusted him to protect her no matter what. The chase continued for hours. Ryan had to make quick decisions, sometimes choosing paths that were narrow, tangled with roots, or dangerously close to cliffs. Lyra stumbled a few times, but he caught her each time. Despite her fear, she began helping him. She pointed out safer paths, small openings between thick trees, and hidden spots where they could rest without being seen. By midnight, the forest opened into a wide clearing. The moon reflected off a small river that cut through the land. Ryan considered crossing it, but the raiders were still close. Crossing would slow them down, yet it might also lose the pursuers if they guessed wrong. He set Lyra down gently and let her drink from the river. Her hands cupped the cold water, and she brought it to her lips carefully. Ryan watched, alert for any sign of danger. In that quiet moment, he realized how much he had grown attached to her. She was brave, small but clever, and trusting in a way few beings ever were. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. They moved into the river, letting the cool water cover their feet. Ryan kept her close, making sure she did not slip. The water slowed them slightly, but the forest on the other side offered cover. As they reached the opposite bank, a shout rang out. The raiders had found their trail. Ryan grabbed Lyra and ran. The forest seemed endless, with tangled roots and low-hanging branches. He leapt over obstacles, ducked under broken limbs, and carried her when the ground grew impossible. Each step demanded focus, but he never let her fear show. At one point, a raider appeared ahead, blocking their path. His weapon glowed in the dark, ready to strike. Ryan froze for a moment, then made a quick decision. He veered off the path, diving into a cluster of thick bushes. Lyra followed, trusting his every move. The raider cursed and tried to follow, but the thick brush slowed him down. Ryan knew the forest's hidden paths better. Eventually, they reached a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. The roar of falling water masked their entrance. Ryan placed Lyra inside first, then slipped in behind her. The sound of the waterfall hid them perfectly. They crouched in the damp cave, catching their breath. Lyra rested her head against his shoulder. "Are they gone?" she asked softly. "They will not find us here," Ryan replied. "We are safe for now." She nodded, closing her eyes. Though tired, she managed a small smile. Ryan felt a sense of relief, but he knew the journey was far from over. The raiders would keep hunting her. He had to move before morning. At dawn, they left the cave. Ryan had found a hidden route leading out of the forest, one few could follow. Lyra walked beside him now, still holding his hand, but moving with more confidence. Her trust in him grew stronger with each step. Along the way, she spoke softly in her language, pointing to the sun, the trees, and the river they had crossed. Ryan tried to repeat her words, laughing quietly when he failed. The small moments of peace reminded him of why he was risking everything. Lyra deserved a future free from fear, and he was determined to give it to her. The chase had taught them both something. Ryan learned to rely on Lyra's instincts and knowledge of her home, and she learned to trust a human completely. Together, they were stronger than either alone. As they approached the edge of the forest, Ryan paused. Beyond lay open plains and distant mountains. The raiders could strike at any moment, but he had hope. They had survived the night, and they would survive the days ahead. He looked at Lyra. "Almost there," he said. She tilted her head, eyes filled with hope. For the first time since he had found her, Ryan felt a sense of determination deeper than fear. He would not fail her. Not now, not ever. Hand in hand, they stepped out of the shadows of the forest and into the uncertain light of a new day, ready to face whatever dangers awaited them next. The plains stretched wide before Ryan and Lyra, golden under the morning sun. Gentle hills rolled toward distant mountains, and the wind carried the scent of grass and fresh water. For the first time in days, Ryan allowed himself to relax slightly. The forest behind them had hidden dangers, but the open land gave a feeling of freedom. Lyra walked beside him carefully, her small steps quick but cautious. She had grown stronger since he rescued her, though her shoulders still carried the weight of fear and uncertainty. Every now and then, she glanced at Ryan, as if checking that he had not disappeared. "You are brave," Ryan said softly, noticing her determination. She looked up at him, tilting her head in curiosity. She could not understand all his words, but the tone carried meaning. He smiled at her tiny nod. They came to a small stream cutting across the plains. Lyra ran to it, dipping her hands into the cool water. She laughed quietly when she splashed some water on her face. Her joy was simple, pure, and it warmed Ryan's heart. "See," he said, smiling. Life is still good, even in a war. She repeated some of the words, trying to mimic him. Her accent was soft and musical, and Ryan chuckled. She smiled proudly at her success. As they continued walking, Ryan noticed she was studying him closely. She had questions, though she had not yet learned to ask them in a language he could fully understand. She pointed at his armor, at his rifle, at his helmet. Finally, she held out her hand, palms up, as if asking him to show her. Ryan knelt. Carefully, he removed a part of his armor so she could see the mechanisms inside. Lyra's eyes widened as she examined it. She touched the smooth metal, then tapped the buttons and levers lightly. Ryan let her explore. "You want to understand, don't you?" he asked softly. She nodded, whispering a word he did not recognize. For hours, they stayed near the stream. Ryan showed her how to use small tools, how to read the maps he carried, and how to notice tracks in the grass. Lyra listened carefully, absorbing every lesson. She began pointing out tracks of animals and hidden dangers, surprising Ryan with her awareness. When they rested, Lyra asked about his home. Though she could not understand his words fully, she watched his face for meaning. He described Earth simply: tall cities, blue oceans, green forests, and people who lived in harmony with the land. Her eyes sparkled at the thought of a world so different from her own. "You have a brave heart," Lyra said in her language. She pointed to him, then to herself, and then touched her chest. Ryan understood enough to smile. She was telling him she trusted him. That trust was rare, and he valued it deeply. As the sun rose higher, Ryan noticed movement in the distance. Raiders. They had not given up. He grabbed Lyra's hand and led her into a small depression in the plains, hidden by tall grass. They crouched low, watching the raiders cross the open land. "They will not see us here," he whispered. She nodded silently, trusting him completely. Hours passed as the raiders searched without success. Ryan and Lyra remained hidden, sharing quiet moments of conversation and small laughter. She told him about the animals of her planet, strange creatures with wings or scales, and he shared stories of Earth animals she could imagine. A sense of friendship grew between them. Though they were different species, their bond was strong. They understood each other in ways words alone could not capture. Ryan found himself caring not just for her safety but for her happiness. Lyra, in turn, began to see him as someone who could be trusted entirely. When the raiders finally gave up and moved on, Ryan and Lyra continued their journey. The plains stretched long, but they walked with confidence. Ryan encouraged her to speak more, to name things in her own language and in his. She giggled when he stumbled over her words, and he laughed when she tried to repeat his. By late afternoon, they reached a small grove of trees. The shade was welcome after the long sunlit plains. They sat together under the trees, sharing a simple meal. Lyra ate carefully, savoring the food, while Ryan watched her. She was stronger than she looked, but he knew the journey ahead would test them both. "Do you miss her?" Ryan asked softly. He pointed toward the mountains in the distance, imagining the queen waiting for her daughter. Lyra nodded, her silver eyes reflecting sadness and hope together. She touched her chest and then pointed to the mountains. "I promise," Ryan said firmly, placing a hand on his chest. "I will get you to her." She looked at him and whispered her name, Ryan. Her trust and hope shone clearly in her face. Night came quietly. Stars sparkled above, bright against the dark sky. Ryan set up a small campfire while Lyra rested nearby. She watched the flames dance, fascinated by the simple warmth and light. Ryan thought about the journey ahead. The raiders would not give up, and danger would continue. Yet the trust and friendship between them gave him strength. Lyra finally curled up beside him, exhausted from the day. She leaned against his side, eyes closing slowly. He placed a hand gently over her shoulder, keeping watch. For Ryan, the day had revealed something he did not expect. A strange friendship had grown in the middle of a war. A child from another world had come to trust a human, and in return, he had promised protection. That bond, fragile yet powerful, became the reason he moved forward. The night passed quietly, the forest and plains around them calm. When dawn came, Ryan and Lyra would face new challenges, but the lessons of the day remained. Trust, friendship, and courage could overcome fear. And together, they would continue toward the queen who waited for her daughter. Ryan looked down at Lyra, sleeping peacefully beside him, and smiled softly. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we take another step home." The mountains loomed ahead, dark shapes against the orange sky of late afternoon. Ryan and Lyra walked steadily, their feet crunching over rocks and loose dirt. The air grew colder with every step, and the wind carried a scent of stone and distant rivers. Lyra tightened her grip on Ryan's hand. Her silver eyes reflected both hope and worry. "I can see it," she whispered in her language, pointing toward the mountains. "Home." Ryan nodded. He did not know what lay ahead. The Queen's palace might still stand, but the war had left much of the world in ruins. He could see signs of destruction from a distance, smoke rising from forests, broken walls scattered across valleys. Yet he held to his promise. He would not let Lyra down. As they climbed higher, the path became steeper and more dangerous. Loose rocks slid under their feet, and the wind pushed against them. Ryan stayed close to Lyra, guiding her carefully and holding her steady when she stumbled. Hours later, they reached a plateau. From here, the land spread out below, revealing the ruined remains of villages and outposts. The sight was grim. Fires still burned in some settlements, while others were abandoned entirely. Lyra's small hand squeezed Ryan's. She could not speak the fear in her heart, but he understood. "We will keep going," he said softly. She looked up at him and nodded. They continued along a narrow mountain trail. The shadows of the peaks stretched long, and the first stars appeared in the sky. Night brought new dangers. Predators prowled the cliffs, and the cold made every step a test of endurance. Yet Ryan pressed forward. Lyra's hope rested on him, and he would not falter. Suddenly, a shadow moved ahead. Ryan froze, pressing Lyra behind a large rock. Two raiders appeared, scanning the plateau. Their weapons glowed faintly in the dark. They had tracked the pair again. Ryan studied the terrain quickly. The raiders were between them and the palace, blocking the safest path. He whispered to Lyra to stay quiet and follow his instructions. She pressed against his chest, trusting him completely. With careful steps, Ryan led her along a hidden edge of the plateau. The rocks jutted out, forming narrow ledges. One wrong step would be dangerous. Yet he moved confidently, knowing the raiders would not risk following such a risky path. Lyra followed closely, her small hands gripping his armor. The raiders shouted angrily as they realized the humans were moving. One fired a shot, the light cutting across the dark. Ryan pushed Lyra down behind a rock as the projectile whistled past. He gritted his teeth. They could not stay exposed for long. He spotted a narrow tunnel leading into the side of the mountain. It was hidden by rocks and shadows. Ryan led Lyra inside. The darkness was thick, but it protected them. They crouched low, listening as the raiders shouted in frustration outside. "Almost there," Ryan whispered. Lyra nodded, pressing closer to him. She trusted his promise more than anything in the world. Hours passed as they moved through the tunnel. The path twisted and turned, sometimes opening into small caves. Lyra pointed to carvings on the wall, symbols of her people. Ryan studied them, realizing the tunnel was part of an ancient path once used to reach the Queen's palace. "Your people made this?" he asked softly. She nodded, a proud smile briefly crossing her face. For a moment, the fear faded. History and hope blended in her small heart. When they finally emerged from the tunnel, they saw the palace in the distance. Once a grand structure of gleaming towers and spires, it now lay in partial ruin. Sections were broken, gates were torn open, and smoke rose from parts of the city nearby. Yet some towers still stood, tall and unbroken, as if protecting the last hope of the kingdom. Lyra gasped, tears forming in her eyes. She pointed and whispered, "Mother." Ryan tightened his grip on her hand. The journey had been long, but they had made it this far. The Queen's palace was ahead, but danger was still present. Raiders could be anywhere, and the surrounding ruins were treacherous. They would need to move carefully. As they approached the city, the silence was broken by distant footsteps. Ryan crouched behind a low wall, pulling Lyra down with him. He scanned the area. Raiders had returned, likely expecting them to arrive here. Their glowing weapons reflected in the dark, searching for the girl. "We need a plan," Ryan whispered. Lyra looked at him, unsure, but he reassured her with a gentle smile. "We can do this together." He led her along the shadowed edges of the city, keeping to walls and ruins. Lyra pointed out smaller paths she remembered from childhood stories, paths that led closer to the palace without being exposed. Ryan followed her guidance. She had knowledge of her world that no map could show him. Hours passed as they navigated ruined streets, crumbling towers, and collapsed bridges. Every step was careful, precise, and tense. But slowly, they drew closer to the palace gates. From the shadows, Ryan observed soldiers guarding the entrance. He whispered to Lyra to stay low. She pressed against him, trembling but silent. He watched the guards carefully, planning the safest approach. "Soon," he whispered. "Just a little further." Lyra nodded, trusting him completely. Her eyes reflected hope and fear at the same time. She knew the Queen awaited her, and Ryan would not let her down. Finally, as night fell, they found a small hidden entrance along the palace walls. It was narrow, protected by old stonework, and led directly toward the central courtyard. Ryan guided Lyra through, careful with every step. When they emerged, the palace loomed above them, partially intact but clearly showing scars from the war. Smoke curled from broken towers, but banners of the Queen's kingdom still hung along some walls. Lyra's eyes shone with recognition and longing. "We are here," Ryan whispered. "You're home." She took a deep breath and whispered in awe, "Mother." Ryan held her close, feeling the weight of the journey behind them and the danger still ahead. The palace gates were near, but reaching them would not be easy. Shadows lingered, and enemies could strike at any moment. Yet he had come this far. He would not stop. Together, hand in hand, they prepared to move toward the palace, each step a promise kept, each shadow a challenge faced, and each heartbeat a reminder that hope could survive even in the darkest of times. The palace gates stood tall and imposing before Ryan and Lyra, their metal surfaces scarred and dented from the war. Smoke curled from the distant towers, and the sound of the wind through broken walls carried the faint echoes of battles long past. Ryan crouched behind a low wall, holding Lyra close to him. Her small hand gripped his tightly, her silver eyes wide with both hope and fear. "We are close," he whispered softly. "Stay with me." She nodded, pressing her face against his armor. Every step forward would be dangerous. Raiders could be waiting anywhere, and the shadows of the palace offered countless hiding places. Ryan took a deep breath, steadying himself for what lay ahead. He had come this far. He would not fail now. The first patrol appeared suddenly around a broken corner. Two raiders moved slowly, scanning the area with glowing weapons. Ryan pressed Lyra down behind a pile of rubble. She trembled slightly, but he kept his hand on her shoulder, reassuring her with silent strength. Ryan studied the patrol. He knew he could not let them reach the gates. If the raiders captured Lyra now, all their effort would be wasted. He waited until the patrol was focused on something in the distance. Then, with careful precision, he struck. Using a small tool from his belt, he triggered a noise in the opposite direction. The raiders turned, moving to investigate. "Come on," Ryan whispered, guiding Lyra silently past the corner. Her small steps were quick but quiet. Together, they moved closer to the palace gates. More raiders appeared as they neared the entrance. Ryan realized they would not allow them to pass easily. The final stand was approaching. He pressed Lyra against a wall and whispered, "Stay close. Follow my lead." The first raider raised a weapon, but Ryan acted before they could fire. He threw a small device that emitted a blinding flash of light, temporarily disorienting the raiders. He grabbed Lyra's hand and sprinted toward a side entrance that led into the palace courtyard. The raiders shouted angrily, firing shots that missed by inches. Ryan shielded Lyra with his body, guiding her through the chaos. She stumbled, but he caught her, pressing her close. Her trust in him was absolute, and he would not betray it. They reached a corner of the courtyard, where shadows provided some cover. Ryan took a moment to catch his breath, checking Lyra. She was scared but unharmed. Her silver eyes shone with determination. "You are very brave," he whispered. She smiled faintly, a small spark of courage in the middle of fear. Suddenly, more raiders appeared from the broken towers. Ryan realized they were surrounded. There was no escape. They had to fight, and they had to fight now. He lifted a small weapon from his belt, aiming carefully. Lyra watched, her body pressed against his side. She did not speak, but her presence gave him strength. He would not fail her, not after all they had endured. The battle began. Ryan moved swiftly, using cover and quick strikes to defend both of them. Lyra followed his movements, ducking when he ducked and moving only when he guided her. Together, they became a coordinated team, small but effective. Despite their skill, the raiders were numerous. One of them lunged at Lyra, but Ryan intercepted, striking the attacker aside. Lyra gasped, then regained her composure, ready to continue. The fight was tense, each moment demanding full attention. Ryan realized they could not stay in the courtyard. They needed higher ground. He guided Lyra toward a small stairway leading to a partially intact tower. The climb was difficult, and the raiders tried to block them at every turn. Yet they moved quickly, trusting each other completely. When they reached the top of the tower, They had a clear view of the palace gates and surrounding walls. The raiders were still below, searching for them. Ryan took a deep breath. They had survived the most dangerous part of the battle, but one final challenge remained: the direct confrontation with the raider commander who had been hunting Lyra. The commander appeared suddenly on the courtyard, his glowing weapon raised. He shouted orders, rallying the remaining raiders. Ryan knew he had to act decisively. He pushed Lyra behind a stone pillar and aimed carefully. The commander fired, but Ryan anticipated the shot, dodging to the side and returning fire with precision. The battle was fierce, but Ryan's skill and determination gave him the advantage. Lyra watched, learning to remain calm in the face of danger. Her small hands gripped his armor as he moved, every strike calculated to protect both of them. Finally, the commander fell, and the remaining raiders scattered. The courtyard was quiet once more, except for the sound of wind and distant fires. Ryan lowered his weapon, breathing heavily. He looked at Lyra, who was trembling with relief and awe. "You did it," she whispered, her voice small but filled with gratitude. "No," Ryan replied softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We did it together." The two of them moved carefully down into the palace grounds. Though much of the structure was damaged, the central hall remained intact. From the shadows of the large entrance, a figure appeared. A tall alien woman, regal and commanding, stepped forward. Her eyes widened as she saw Lyra alive. "Lyra," she cried, her voice trembling. The queen rushed forward, tears forming in her eyes. Lyra ran into her mother's arms without hesitation. The queen embraced her daughter tightly, holding her as if she would never let go again. Ryan stepped back, watching silently. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His promise had been kept. He had protected the girl, brought her safely home, and reunited her with her mother. The queen looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She spoke in her language, and though Ryan did not understand the words, the meaning was clear. She thanked him for his bravery, for his kindness, and for keeping her daughter safe. Lyra smiled at him, her trust and admiration shining brightly. She whispered his name softly, and he nodded, feeling the bond between them that had grown stronger with every challenge. Ryan realized something important. The war, the battles, and the fear had all been real, but the connection between beings from different worlds was stronger than any weapon. Courage, compassion, and trust could create bonds that survived even the darkest times. As night fell over the palace, the fires from the ruined city below reflected in the towers. The queen held her daughter close, and Ryan stood quietly, knowing he had made a difference. The journey had been long and dangerous, but the reward was worth every step. For the first time in many nights, Ryan felt a deep peace. Lyra was safe, the queen was reunited with her daughter, and hope had survived the shadows of war. The palace courtyard was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The fires from the damaged city below flickered like tiny stars, reflecting off the broken walls and towers. For the first time in many days, the tension in the air had lifted. Ryan stood a few steps away, watching silently as the queen held her daughter close. Lyra's small arms were wrapped tightly around her mother, and tears streamed down both of their faces. "Mom, I'm back," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with relief and joy. The queen pressed her daughter close. "My Lyra," she said, her voice soft and full of emotion. "You are safe. You are home." Ryan felt a warmth spread through him. The journey had been long and dangerous, filled with forests, rivers, and endless pursuit. He had fought raiders, guided Lyra through treacherous paths, and risked his own life countless times. Yet seeing this moment, the reunion of mother and daughter, made every step worthwhile. Lyra looked at Ryan, her silver eyes shining with gratitude. You saved me," she said softly, as if the words themselves carried weight. "I promised I would," Ryan replied. "I would never let anyone take you away." The queen turned to him, her expression a mixture of awe and respect. She spoke in her language, her words slow and deliberate. Though Ryan did not understand, the meaning was clear. She was thanking him. She was honoring the courage and kindness of someone from another world who had risked everything to save her child. Lyra smiled, touching his armor lightly. "Thank you," she whispered again. The bond between them, forged in fear and danger, had grown unbreakable. The queen led them inside the palace. Though much of it was damaged, the central hall still held its grandeur. The high ceilings and tall windows reflected the light of the fires outside, and banners bearing the royal crest still hung proudly. Guards and servants who had survived the war watched silently, their faces filled with awe and relief. Ryan stayed close to Lyra, making sure she felt safe. The journey was not yet fully over, the world around them was still scarred by war, and danger might return. But for now, they were home. The queen's presence alone brought a sense of protection and peace. Inside the hall, the queen guided Lyra to a seat of honor. She knelt before her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Lyra smiled, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. For the first time in days, she felt truly safe. Ryan stood quietly, giving them space. Yet he could feel the queen's gaze upon him. He knew she was considering how to honor his courage. He did not seek reward or recognition, his purpose had been to keep Lyra safe. Still, the respect he felt from her was something he would carry with him forever. The queen finally spoke to Ryan in a calm voice, her words clear and deliberate. "You are a human, and yet you have shown bravery and honor beyond measure. You have brought my daughter home. For this, I owe you my deepest gratitude." Ryan bowed his head slightly. "It was my duty," he said. "And my choice. I would do it again." Lyra giggled softly at the exchange. Her laughter was light, almost musical, and it brought a smile to Ryan's face. She climbed onto a nearby bench to sit beside him, holding his hand. "Friend," she said simply, the word carrying more meaning than any title or rank. The queen watched the interaction with a mixture of relief and pride. She understood something fundamental: trust and courage could build bridges between worlds. Ryan had crossed the line between species, between fear and hope, and had created a bond stronger than any war could break. Night deepened over the palace. The fires outside burned low, casting long shadows through the windows. Ryan, Lyra, and the queen stood together in the central hall. Though the city was scarred and the war still loomed in the distance, for a moment, peace reigned. Lyra spoke softly to her mother about the journey, pointing at Ryan and gesturing toward the mountains and forests they had crossed. The queen listened, nodding, tears in her eyes. She understood the courage it took to face the raiders, to move through dangerous forests, and to never abandon her daughter. "You have grown strong, Lyra," the queen said, brushing her daughter's hair. "But the greatest strength is trust. You have learned to trust another, and that trust has saved you." Lyra looked at Ryan and smiled. "I trusted him," she said simply. "And he trusted you," the queen added, her voice filled with admiration. "Together, you have shown bravery beyond what anyone could expect." Ryan felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. The journey had been dangerous, exhausting, and filled with fear. Yet it had also revealed the best parts of humanity: courage, compassion, and honor. Even in a galaxy torn by war, those qualities could shine brighter than any weapon. The Queen finally turned fully to Ryan. She spoke again, her words slower this time, emphasizing each one. "You are welcome here. You are a friend to my family and to my people. Your courage will be remembered always." Ryan bowed his head. "Thank you," he said simply. He knew words could never fully express the bond formed between them, the respect earned, or the relief of a promise kept. Lyra leaned against him, her small hand holding his tightly. "Friend," she said again, and the simplicity of the word carried more meaning than any crown, weapon, or ceremony. Outside, the city was quiet. The war had left scars, but the palace stood as a symbol of hope. Inside, a mother and daughter were reunited, and a human soldier had earned a place in their story. For a brief moment, the galaxy felt lighter, brighter, and filled with possibility. Ryan looked at the Queen and Lyra. "You are safe now," he said softly. "And that is enough for me." The Queen smiled. She understood the depth of his words. He had risked everything, yet he sought nothing in return. The child was home, and peace, however fragile, had returned to the palace. Lyra looked up at him, her silver eyes shining. "Friend," she said once more, and Ryan knew that the bond between them would last a lifetime. As night fully settled over the palace, Ryan stood quietly at the edge of the hall, watching mother and daughter embrace. He realized that courage and compassion could create bridges across worlds, that trust could overcome fear, and that even in a galaxy filled with war, hope could endure. The Queen finally placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, holding her close. "You are home," she said softly. Lyra looked at Ryan and smiled, and he nodded, feeling the fulfillment of a promise kept. For Ryan, the journey had ended. For Lyra, the reunion had healed her fears. And for the Queen, the bond forged between human and alien would remain a symbol of courage, hope, and trust for generations to come. The palace was quiet, the stars above shining bright, and a sense of peace settled over the kingdom. Together, mother and daughter, human and alien, had faced darkness and danger and had emerged stronger. The reunion was complete, and the future, though uncertain, felt full of hope.